Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Thanks to viewer SyphilisX for suggesting this question, asking, how does Consecrated Sphinx and Hullbreacher work together? So, this is a pretty interesting one, and both of these cards have a similar type of effect in punishing players who like to draw lots of extra cards. So let's see what would happen if you put both of their abilities together on the same side of the battlefield. So, anytime you're going to draw a card from your normal draw step in the first part of your turn, then Consecrated Sphinx will apply to that one, because it applies to all draws, unlike Hullbreacher. That means that the player will get to draw 2 cards. Any other draws that a player would take outside of that one, well, those are going to be covered by Hullbreacher. So instead of those draws happening, the player who controls Hullbreacher will get treasure tokens. So if you notice how Hullbreacher works, it has a replacement effect. You can tell because of the word instead. That means that it functions by looking for any draws the player would take outside of the first one in their draw step, and kicking in, replacing that draw with something completely different, in this case, making a treasure token. Because of that, the Consecrated Sphinx will not trigger off of any of these, because the draw gets replaced and something else happens instead. That means that there isn't the best synergy between these two. The really kind of interesting one that I think is how they work when they're on opposite sides of the battlefield. So let's consider what would happen if Amy, who controls a Hullbreacher, has her draw for the turn while Nick controls a Consecrated Sphinx. That will mean that Amy will draw a card, Consecrated Sphinx will trigger, and that will mean Nick gets to draw 2 cards. However, Hullbreacher doesn't like that happening, so if Nick chooses to take those 2 draws, Hullbreacher will replace that with Amy getting 2 treasure tokens. Pretty solid counter. Anytime Amy would want to draw a card, well, the 2 cards that this Consecrated Sphinx provides is always going to be outside of the normal draw that Nick gets during his draw step, so the Hullbreacher counters the Consecrated Sphinx pretty hard in this case. There was one other thing that I thought of when I was writing this question, and that is, instead of Hullbreacher, let's consider what would happen if Amy had a Notion Thief. So, the same sort of thing will happen in that anytime Amy is going to draw a card, then the Consecrated Sphinx is going to trigger and give Nick 2 draws. This time, Nick wants to take those draws. Why? Well, let's see what will happen. Amy's Notion Thief is going to take those 2 draws, stealing them away for Amy, and Amy will get to draw 2. At first, this doesn't look like it's going to be very good for Nick, but look what's just happened. Amy gets to draw 2 more cards, which means that Nick's Consecrated Sphinx is going to trigger 2 more times. You can see that anytime Amy draws, Nick is going to have the option to make her draw 2 more cards. Eventually, Amy will run out of cards in her library, and Nick will win the game because of it. Pretty savage counter, don't you think? And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Have you ever seen this sort of thing happen in a game that you were a part of? I'd love to hear about it. Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.